Welcome to the Revolution Insight series. This is going to be an episode regarding the Ethiopian Revolution. And there is, honestly, there's so much that was really in this video here. It's like a 2.5 hour video, but it had so much knowledge about it's really useful in terms of just how to think about revolution in general, but and I think I see it as particularly valuable because this was primarily a student, this video was primarily about kind of the student organization and what took place in the student organizing of kind of a, trying to essentially the fight for a real true society that was going to be best for the actual populace of people that lived in the society. So this was, there were so many lessons here. I only have a few notes, but I've gotten, every time I think about this particular video and this particular idea of the revolution in general, I feel like my background noise just kind of explodes in terms of what needs to be really translated in a video like this. But I'm gonna kind of just try to keep things to a minimum. So of course, like I said before, it was a student. This video is primarily about the student organization that happened in Ethiopia, and this was less militant. All right, this wasn't really a military affair, and that is it's so interesting because at one point in the video they mentioned how you don't really want a military-led revolution, because that's not a real revolution. That's kind of just a changing of the guards, and that's very much interesting, right? You want a population of, in order to really gain and maintain a civil society, you really want somebody who's going to think beyond the idea of what this society, or what this kind of this mentality of, let's say, the mob, would a society can really be thought of as a protection racket for in terms of its beginning stages, right? The idea is hey, you guys get protected, just give us the taxes and nobody bothers you, right? And we build off of that. That's a very huge thing in terms of even the actual world that I'm building, right? In terms of actually what is going into that world and how this world develops. I'm not going to give up too much there, but the idea is very much important. And this concept tells me that when you're thinking beyond a military-led revolution to, let's say, a student-led revolution, or something that values education, that tells me that you are thinking beyond that idea of simply the protection racket. You're thinking about what does it take to be comfortable in this society? What do we really take to progress in this society? And that's what we want when we think about revolution. We don't want to go backwards, right? Because there's a lot of people who depend on the comforts of society, especially nowadays in America. There's a lot of anarchists now that the self-proclaimed anarchists, but I think if they ever seen true chaos, then they would have deep regrets in terms of what that would actually mean for the populations of people that a lot of them will claim that they care about. So it's very much something that we need to study, I think, even especially today. But also this concept of Americans and the way they Ethiopians seeing black Americans primarily, or the civil rights struggle in America, I'll say, and they really wanted. They were pushed. They were They were inspired by that in a lot of cases, and I didn't know that at first. And there was like this one thing. I just want to mention this real quick. There was like this one thing where like there was there was like some kind of like African American the village that was supposedly destroyed or something like that, or some kind of like development that was destroyed, and I definitely felt a way about that, because there's a kind of a stigma when it comes down to Black Americans and kind of Africans that come over here, and I think there may be still an element of it that may be true in terms of some people, but that idea of kind of seeing that, I was thinking to myself at first when I seen kind of the news, I was like, man, you know, there's no way they would have done that if it was kind of a settlement for white Americans. And that was kind of I've seen a few videos that kind of express that, but when I looked into it to try to also, you know, pull up some insight for another video I was working on, I seen that these people, like the development, the people who were responsible for that development, they did not follow any of the guidelines. They didn't pay certain things. It was simply it was really despicable to think that this person or these people and the whatever companies, they allowed this idea to permeate through society, because they were really just cowards. Like, that was really what they were, like, in terms of the Americans that purchased that place, or that said that they purchased the place, or they, you know, they didn't quite follow their end of the bargain or the deal with that place, but they allowed that message to permeate through America. And it was that right there, that idea of what the relationship between, you know, African Americans and just Africans in general, there is much more hope than anybody who's been heavily swayed by that particular project. And I encourage people to look into it in terms of what was behind that, if you have come into contact with what I'm talking about. And just continuing on with the series, politicians also had this thing to where they pretended to be one of the poor, right? And this is so interesting, because they, like, a lot of these people, they need the they have this kind of sick infatuation with cosplaying like they're poor, right? And that's, you know, it's politicians, but it's also just rich people in general, right? So we've gotta look out for that, because the you know, regardless of what these people were projecting, the image that they were projecting, the bills that they denied, like they mentioned a bill that was denied that just allowed some kind of like it was very modest in terms of like trying to get like a better standard of living and some protections for basically people who weren't landlords. And I mean, it just got denied, like outright, like denied. There wasn't even like a second meeting or something. It sounded like there wasn't even a thought about this bill after, you know, even just reviewing it just on a surface level. And I mean, that's what politicians, a lot of politicians, that's what they'll do. They'll simply just cosplay like they are for you, like they're on your side, and they're really not. There is no like, oh, it's us versus them thing for like at the top, and those particular in Congress, they're really like, a lot of them are really friends, especially the ones that have power to really do any, you know, promote any real change. They're really just friends, and they know that they need to keep up the charade going, like there is kind of a, you know, oh, this battle versus this battle, and you know, we're doing this and they're doing that and they're fighting us. And it does get like that, and it's very beneficial. But in regard to this, they were clearly cosplaying, and it was honestly like laughable and really, I mean, it's just despicable every time that I think about like politicians in general. But this another thing was that most of the people were peasants. They were farmers, right? That was most of the people. I'm not like they were, and they use the word peasants, and I got used to that just reading more about like different places like China, the way they kind of talk about their populace, because you say peasant here, it's like, who you call them a peasant? Like, put down this McDonald's bag and we won't go outside. but most of the people were like living in a, basically in just as people who were essentially just farmers and things like that, and just normal day-to-day workers. And the idea of what was valuable to them, they didn't have a real robust education system to keep people educated and keep people further and provide different methods for people to educate themselves. That was very, very important. Also, the government, the way they tried to crack down on the student protests was very interesting. They tried to require a few things. One, they tried to require 7-day notice. 2, the information of the organizers. And 3, the approval of the slogans that were going to be used. So I don't know, I don't know what kind of, protest you do against the government when they're approving everything. That's like they're approving all of the slogans, and they know the information of the organizers. So if anybody gets out of line, and let's say the organizer goes missing, you kind of realize like, oh shoot, that's a problem. But they protested this before they tried to actually enact this particular law. And when I talk about protesters going missing, another thing is it got pretty bad. It got extremely bad, actually. Like there was a moment in the there was a situation mentioned in the video where there was essentially a teacher that was anti-establishment, right? They didn't follow the particular guidelines, and they were killed. They were killed in the city, and not only were they killed, they were with their wife and kid when they were killed, and the wife started screaming, and they shot the wife for screaming, like with the kid, or they shot the wife for screaming. And I am like, that is, people got to be careful. People really got to be careful about this idea, because especially like when it comes down to like these people, they get in power, and a lot of them have like, they're kept in power by essentially just very mentally ill people, right? Cough, ice, cough, right? Like these are people who are very, very much mentally ill and disturbed people that are able to keep these kind of, that are able to keep up this facade. So you guys gotta watch out about essentially the idea of mental health and what that means in a society like ours, in general right now especially. Also, another thing that was really cool was that zines became really important. For those who don't know, zines, that's Z-I-N-E-S, that's magazines, but short for magazines, became really important. So students would essentially print off their own like mini magazines, and they would start spreading those around, and that became really huge in Ethiopia. I didn't know that before, but that was really cool to see that, and I really like the idea of these guys essentially just getting rid of the middleman who a lot of times doesn't. I mean, some people will argue that they do have a purpose in terms of the publication industry and editors and things like that. I think that they definitely have a purpose, but the actual bureaucracy in the publication industry, I think, is garbage for the most part. So definitely something to look out for. But zines became really important, and I really like that idea of these guys being able to communicate with each other like that. For those that don't know, I'm also not created a zine before. I've created zines before, and I've gotten into the culture a little bit, and that was like really, I thought, nice to start to kind of see that side of society. And it is naturally, it's natural revolution type energy in terms of those, anti-establishment energy in terms of the zines in general, and those are very much instrumental, I think, in terms of the passing of information, how you pass information, what you do. Also, the government, this government that was really, they were very much like this. It was monstrous. Like it was absolutely monstrous, and I think that's the kicker. Like you want to be peaceful, because it's just in situations like that. It's just like if being aggressive would cause a complete backlash in terms of something that is disproportionate to what was done to the people they want to do to you. So if you think about kind of the conflict with Israel and Palestine, things like that, you start to get it. But I'm not going to get off on a tangent there, but it's I think it's a little bit different over there. But you still got to think about that, especially today. Like what are we doing? What's kind of how things are being done now. And the government, they use some ridiculous propaganda to justify assassinating their own people, and it was just clownish. It was really clownish. Like you see what's happening today in terms of with kind of the November 2025, and you think like, okay, nobody's really taking Trump seriously with a lot of the stuff in terms of what's being said. But you start to realize that some people are taking this a lot of, they're cherry picking what's at face value. I don't think anybody thinks Epstein was a Democrat hoax, but they are kind of taking a lot of what he says at face value and still using honorifics to describe this very sick, perverted person. But it is something to look at. Another thing is parents joined together to stop the military. Like, this is something that I've seen before in terms of the idea of parents, particularly moms. I want to say, I think it was in the Argentina Revolution, I want to say, but they got together and they would just like blockade with just blockade different making sure that the military couldn't raid and take people, and they would also like harbor students and things like that were being what the military was looking to take. And it was interesting because they were assassinating those parents too, and they made some great sacrifices. And you kind of got to realize, like, you don't want to, like, in terms of the idea of, particularly when thinking about like mothers and their children, like you get in the way, it's going down. Like a lot of like people don't realize like it will go down, and you gotta like, and you end up like tarnishing having to fight a mom. That's a lose-lose situation. It's just a lose, like you just, there is no win. There's absolutely no win. But they were doing that, and they were getting away with that for a while. And people were also being tortured. And like I said, there was also poetry played a huge role in this as well, which is interesting. In terms of course, in terms of the Revolution Insight series, I'm doing this to essentially gain more, to have people understand, get more understanding behind the insight in terms of what's going into this particular world that I'm building, but also to just essentially study more and build the world, right? So I'm basically practicing my actual art skills while I'm listening to these things. I'm listening to these particular documentaries, these pieces of information, stuff like that. And this right here was so instrumental because I always, like, you know that I think the red meat, the anarchist red meat is, hey, guns, explosion, combat in the system, whatever. But actuality, right, what it really looks like, especially today when we live in an age of drones and nuclear weapons, it doesn't look like that. That's not the way it looks. That's not the way it really happens. Okay? It does look like students leading something. It does look like intellectuals standing up and being brave about, actually speaking the truth. It does look like parents, normal people, essentially taking back what belongs to them. So this was so essential, even down to like the poetry and the zines. I thought was so cool, and I'm definitely gonna use that. I'm not gonna say where, but like I said, check this Ethiopian Revolution out. This is a 2.5 hour video. I think it might be the longest one I've seen thus far in this series, but it's so worth it, especially if you're into just Ethiopia. You could just like baby step it, take like little bite-sized chews out of it, and you'll see. But this is definitely interesting, definitely worth the watch. And in any case, thank you for listening. I hope to see you soon.